Welcome back. In this series of videos, we're going to talk about handling exceptions. And we're going to see some traditional methods in how we have handled errors, and then how we're going to use object-oriented methods in order to handle these errors. Okay. Let's take a look at this code that I have here. Basically, calculates the quotient between two integer numbers. Right? It's a simple program where we ask the user to input two numbers, and then basically we're gonna just provide the two numbers and the result, which is the division of these two numbers. So we know that number 2 cannot be equal to 0, right? So just for sake of showing this, and these are integer numbers, so let's go with 4 and 2, or 6 and 2 to demonstrate. 6 and 2, and the result is basically 3. So okay, so that's good. And we know that if we run this again, and then we go with 6 and 0, we get an error, right? So technically this error uh, basically will stop the program. And this is one of the things that we don't want to do, right? So let's analyze this error. Basically it's an exception. And we're gonna see that all these errors basically are subclasses of the exception class. And technically we can create methods that will then uh, will be used for us to handle errors. Here we have the type of error, and then later we're gonna see all the different type of errors and subclasses. And here we have the error that occurs at line 15, right? So if I click here, right, it takes me to the line where the error occurs, which is here, and then you can troubleshoot and then take care of that. Okay, so what do we do in order to handle these errors? What we have done so far. Okay, so one of the things that we have done is that here we put an if statement. Okay, so now we say that if the second number is not equal to 0, to pretty much print the result. If it's equal to 0, then it will jump to the else and say that the divisor cannot be 0, and then it will stop. Well, you can put this in a while loop and keep asking and asking until the second number is not equal to 0. We are not going to do that. All right, so let's give it a try. I'm just gonna run it, and then I'm just gonna go with the error right away. I'm gonna go with 6 and a 0. I notice that here it pretty much catches the error and says that the number cannot be 0. Right? This is ideally what you want to do. You don't want your program to crash ever. Okay, so we want to handle this situation. A third way is to put everything in a method. Okay, and then let me go here. Okay, and then here in a method, we have something like this. So let's take a look at the main program. So here we ask for two numbers. Now we call a method called Quotient, and this method is of the integer type. I know that because it needs to return an integer type of number. And then technically I'm just gonna get my result and then print it here. So now let's go to the method, and then in the method here we get two numbers. Now here we do our check, right? So if the number 2 is equal to 0, right? This number 2 comes from the argument, then pretty much we print our error and then we exit. If not, it will skip and then return the result. Right? So here I have a run and I put the 6 and the 0, and notice that it just gives me the error. The nice thing about having a method is that technically you can, let's say, duplicate this, right? And then let's say that you have some more procedures or more code, and then you pretty much want to do the same. So now let's ask two different numbers, 3 and 4, and now we're passing 3 and 4 to our method. Let's just get a different type of result number 2. And then here we just do this again. Okay? 3 and 4, and then we just bring our second result. Right, so I kind of like doing everything again, right? So if I run my program, it asks me for two numbers. I'm gonna put 6 and 3. Okay, so it will tell me 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then for the other one, I'm gonna put 5 and 0, and then it will tell me that there's an error, right? So I don't have to repeat my if condition and also my error message, right? So that's the convenience of pretty much using an error. Okay, now let's talk about exceptions, right? So in this case, what we're gonna do is that we're gonna try some code, and then once we try that code, uh, we might have different type of errors, right? And we're gonna deal with some of them. In this case, it's an arithmetic exception what we're dealing with. Later, we're gonna see that we have input mismatch exceptions or array out of bound exceptions, etc., etc. So we don't know what kind of error we might get, right? So what we'll do is that we're gonna use pretty much the try, throw, catch approach, right? So technically, the way that we do this, um, uh, you try, okay? So you try code, okay? And that's gonna happen in this section. So here, if you get an error, right, and you might have error of different types, right? I'm gonna put here type 1, right? Type 2, type 3, we don't know. We might throw this, right, to another piece of code, right, that is technically is going to catch it and handle the error for you. Cache, right, and then it's going to cache here, and it's going to cache here. That's kind of like the deal. And then we're going to see that we might have different types of errors, right? So you're going to see the try, throw, cache keywords in there. Okay. So let me go back. Now looking at quotient with exception code, right? That's kind of like here in your textbook. Right? So technically looking at this listing, quotient with exception. Um, and here we have our main program, okay? And then we get two inputs. And here we are not dealing with input mismatch. We're gonna deal with that later. What happens if I put a double type number? It's gonna crash. And we're gonna see later how we're gonna handle this. For now, I just care about the division by 0. And here we have our try. And here you can put technically your code, right? In the past, we didn't have this at all. Okay, so technically here you can put all your code. Place code here. Okay. In this case, we're calling our method, right? So when we go back to our method, which is down here, this is all inside my try. Okay. Now, here we have my if statement, technically comparing if number 2 is equal to 0. If that happens, then technically it's going to throw an arithmetic exception. Divisor cannot be 0. I mean, why you want to do this? Because here you can identify the error, right? And here you can see that you can put later we're going to see that you can put different messages. And then depending on the message, you will know that the error happens here. Okay? So when number is equal to 0, technically before we stop the program, we had a system.exit. If you guys remember, it's here. It was here, right? And that will exit my program. In this case, when we get a throw, it's like calling another method. So what it does is start looking for a catch, right? And then in that catch, we get my argument is my exception. Okay. So this is my call is going to create an object of the arithmetic exception type, which is a subclass of exception. It will come through here, and then it will give me my error message. The nice thing about this is that my program doesn't exit. It continues. So it continues, and it will go to this cache, right? And then it will come right here. Okay, so that's kind of like the cool thing that it does. So here you can have an exception, or you can put uh, arithmetic exception. Uh, right, so because I mean these are the same type. Okay, since we're dealing with one type of error, this will work fine. If we were dealing with different types, you might want to use the higher class or the superclass exception here, and then take care of the rest. I'm not going to confuse you with that, but we'll take care of that later. Okay, so I'm just gonna go here, gonna run it, enter two integers. Okay, I'll go with a 5 and 0. And notice that it says cannot be divided by 0, but my execution continues. Right? It continues after the cache. Right? So that's pretty nice. Okay. Later we're gonna see that this object that is created, EX, we can actually get information from that object. Okay, and then pretty much identify where it comes from, right? Because this here is the input argument, okay? But play around with this first, okay? And see if you can come up with this simple piece of code, which is trying your code, and here you make a call to Quotient, okay? And here you will throw your error if number 2 is equal to 0, all right? And this is the type of error, and then this is the argument, which is the string. So you're creating an object, right? So this here creates an object, and then when you create that object, it goes to this. Basically, it's a constructor. Okay, so it takes an object of the arithmetic exception type in here, and then basically executes the code in here. And then after that, it doesn't go back to the method, right? It just continues. There is no sense in going back if you know that this is not happening, right? So, for example, let me just put here, we can say string line, and then we can say is it came back from error, and then we put a okay. So let's run it again. And we put 5 and 0, and notice that technically after my execution of the throw, right, this line never happened, right? It just made the call, okay, to the cache, and then took care of this piece of code, and then it just continue after that. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the other type of error, which is an input mismatch exception. Okay, so here let's look at this code, input mismatch. I'm just gonna show you from the textbook. Input mismatch exception demo. Okay, so you have that listing as well. Okay, so in this case, let me just make this bigger. We are trying some code. Okay. And here we create a, sorry about my sore throat. Here you have the creation of an input object. Okay, so we are trying to get a number. Okay, so here if I put a double, it's gonna crash. Okay, so when you put a double, it's gonna create an input mismatch object, right? So technically here we don't have to throw it, right? So once we get the error, the system will throw an object of the input mismatch exception class. It will look for the catch statement, which is here. Then once it's matched, okay, then basically we'll execute this code. Okay, and then it's just gonna say enter the number again, and then it's just gonna continue. Okay, so it will continue, and it says continue input is equal to true, which is this is the flag that we have here, right? And then it will go up to the do, and then do everything again. Okay. Okay, so here technically that you're saying just press enter, right? So this is like a pause. So maybe I should put here press enter to continue, right? To make it more clear. So let's try this. Right, so now continue input is equal to true, right? That's what you have here. And we create the object. So this is a do while, so it's going to execute this for the first time. It says enter an integer, enter a number, so we are right here. So here, I'm just going to put a double, 5.5. And notice that it didn't crash like it used to do. It created input mismatch object right at this point, and it throws that. Right, so technically, in this case, we don't need this line, right? It's there by default. The reason that we have this line in this case is because I wanted to customize my argument, right? So in this case, I didn't. And then it goes to the cache and then execute this line. And then says press enter to continue, right? Well, actually, and then it goes back to enter an integer, right? So while continue input is equal to true, so it goes back again. Right, so now if I enter a 5, it just continues. Okay. So again, try to spend some time in this, and then try to see if you can follow the try throw cache steps.